My essay really just asked people to experience life as someone else. I think a lot of times humanity is lost between people because we don't identify shared experiences. So really this is just take some time and see what it's like to live as a Black woman in America, and maybe those barriers that we put up between ourselves that divide us as people, maybe those will start to come down. Why are we talking about it in the IDS? Where else would we talk about it? This is the student newspaper, and this is the voice of a student who is experiencing something very specific at this university, in this town, in this state. This is the only place you should do it. This is the best place to do it. What really sparked this piece was Ferguson. I've dealt with these issues of race and class and identity my entire life, but they really all came to a head when Ferguson happened, because in my opinion, this is it. This is the civil rights movement of today. Are these moments where we have seen that young Black men are getting robbed of their lives, of their humanity. We're watching it happen, and there are people actively moving against the system. And we saw this with the Occupy movement. You know, we see iterations of this all the time, but this is the first one where I was like, wow, yeah, we can change it. We can't stop talking about race. One of the reasons why we haven't progressed as much as we should have is because we always hit this wall where it's like, I don't want to make other people feel bad. I know you're sensitive about it, so I don't want to press you on it, but you got to make people uncomfortable sometimes, because race is a hard subject. I'm not every Black person. I can only speak for Leah Johnson. You know what I mean? Leah Johnson, the 20-year-old, born and raised in Indianapolis, went to a predominantly white institution, Leah Johnson. Not every Black kid's gonna feel the same way that I feel. We didn't all have the same backstory. So there's no way that we all could have arrived at the same conclusion. But I do think that there are certain, I think there's a certain singularity to the Black experience. There are just threads that run through all of us. There are things we're all gonna share. But my thoughts aren't gonna be everybody else's thoughts. And I really hope that people understand that when they read this story. A sign of privilege is not having to acknowledge the fact that these problems still exist. And just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there, you know? So I'd start with that. That's it. It's not gone just because you're not seeing it, just because you don't feel it every time you walk into a store and somebody's looking at you crazy, or you can't go to a certain restaurant because you know that you're in the backwoods and they're not gonna serve you properly. Just because you don't see those things doesn't mean they don't exist. So I'm looking for a way to say that I had a mental breakdown without saying that I had a mental breakdown when writing this piece. Because I'm trying to provide all these answers. I'm trying to say who it is I am and how I got to be who I am. And really, I'm 20 years old, so it's I really don't have the answers to that right now. So it was really a piece of self-exploration. And I think I learned a lot about me and about my motivations and about my family, even things I didn't know or didn't understand before I started writing this. So it took this to get me to the answers. We haven't had a national conversation on race. It's always been a one-sided, hey, that wasn't me, it's not all of us, you know? So there has to be an acceptance, there has to be a dialogue, and that's why we gotta talk about it now. If not now, then when? You know, Obama being president doesn't mean that these things stop existing. In a way, it makes it harder to talk about them, because then you have this oh, everything must be fine. You know, there's a complacency that comes along with a success like that. And it's a great thing, but that's not it. Reception. When I was writing it, I tried to write it like I didn't care. You know what I mean? No matter what people thought about it when it was done, it was important that I said what I said. But I'm not immune to those things. I'm not immune to the feeling of, oh, people are not gonna like me, people are not gonna respect my work, people are going to criticize it. When you're dealing with issues of race, you know, not everybody is gonna like you. People are gonna comment on the story and they're gonna be like, oh, well, you shouldn't be complaining anyway. You know what I mean? So I anticipate those sorts of reactions because that happens. And given the nature of where we are, South Central Indiana, people are not gonna be happy that I say the things that I say. But I hope that I've written it in a way that doesn't alienate people, just because you're not black or you're not a woman, I don't think that, you know, you should feel put off by the story. At least I hope not. I definitely have an agenda. That's a fact. I knew writing the piece what I wanted you to walk away with. You know what I mean? So like, that's gonna be there. And that's because I don't think as a black woman writing this story, I don't think that I would have felt right about it had I not had a mission in mind. It makes it really hard. It's complicated because I'm writing about probably the most important thing in my life right now, like how I define myself as a human being. And I don't think that there is a greater question than that, you know what I mean? Like, who am I? And I'm literally trying to pour that out and like explain how I got to these conclusions, and where I'm going from here, and where I hope we as a people move from there. There's a lot of stuff that didn't make it into my story because it didn't, because it was too much. You know, it was such a packed argument or such a packed story that it wasn't going to make it into the piece in the end. My grandmother, when I started working on this, I called her because I just had some questions that, because a lot of times you don't talk about these things that hurt you. And I think that's the truth for a lot of families, you know what I mean? You don't talk about stuff that really takes you back to a rough place. And my grandma was born in Little Rock to a family of sharecroppers. She was in Nashville, Tennessee at the time of the sit-ins. She remembers the Freedom Riders. Like she was there in the heart of the civil rights movement. But like we never talked about any of those things before. And that's crazy to me coming from somebody who like studies this, you know what I mean? Like my area of specialty is reporting on race. So I talked to her one night and I had to ask her a couple questions, and before she gets off the phone with me, she's like, Leah, don't let this black stuff control your mind. Some people are always gonna think what they think. We're supposed to be moving forward. So it's like I'm working through this struggle with my family too, because it's like they're trying to keep these things from coming to the forefront. And it's not our family history necessarily, but our racial history, because we're trying so hard to move forward that we think we have to forget about what's happened to us. And that's really hard. That's part of why I had such a hard time getting through this piece. Like I really hit a wall at one point, and I was like, I don't think that I can do this anymore. I don't think that I can spend my life reporting on things like this, because it hurts and it's hard and it doesn't feel like it's getting better all the time. But progress is slow. It took hundreds of years for us to not be considered slaves. So, if I have to write about this for the next 40 years of my career and that changes something, then that's a small price to pay for the end game. So.